everyone, welcome to today's 30 on Thursday, where we will be talking about your SharePoint migration blueprint. If this is your first time joining us, our 30 on Thursday webinar series is a bi-weekly 30-minute SharePoint webinar series where we talk all things Microsoft SharePoint. Our next webinar will be Security and Governance in Yammer, and it will be on April 26th, same time. If you're interested in registering for this webinar or for any of our upcoming webinars, please visit our website sharepoint.protiviti.com/webinars. We are hosting our very first SharePoint Project Management Symposium on June 15th in Reston, Virginia. This features 4 sessions and 1 project management roundtable, 4 PMP speakers and 1 MVP. PMPs can earn 7 PDUs at this event, and registration is only $99. If you're interested in learning more and seeing all the session abstracts, please visit our website sharepoint.protiviti.com/PM Symposium. We are doing live tweeting today during the webinar. Please tweet us your questions and feedback using the hashtag 30TMigration and tweet at ProtivitiSP. Today's session is being recorded. The recording of today's session and all of our past sessions are also on our website. We're going to save all questions to the end of today's presentation. You can insert your questions at any time during the presentation in the question window in the GoToMeeting toolbar, or again, you can tweet us your questions using the hashtag 30TMigration. Again, today's topic is your SharePoint migration blueprint. Our presenter today is Malcolm Eaton with Protiviti, and I am Julia Marble, and I will be moderating today's session. So let's get started. Malcolm, I'm going to make you presenter.
Okay. All right. Oops. Okay. Show my screen. And there we go. Okay. Thank you, Julia. I'm excited to be presenting about migration. I've been fortunate enough to be a part of SharePoint since about 2003, and so I have gotten a chance to do a lot of migrations. And so we'll be talking sort of in general about the migration and the migration path. And one of the things we'll be saying is just kind of what are some really key things that you want to know about migrating from, whether it's a file share, whether it's Office 360, into Office 365, whether you're coming from 2007, 2010. We'll walk through a lot of those different scenarios today. We're going to go fairly fast with 30 minutes, and so like Julia said, we'll tackle all the questions at the end today. One of the things that we'll walk through really are 5 different things to consider when making a migration, and we'll kind of step into each of these different points. And then at the end, what we'll do is sort of bring all that together and give you a migration blueprint, sort of the steps that you want to think about when you're making a migration. And like I said, it's really sort of an agnostic whether you're going to SharePoint 2013 or Office 365. We're kind of looking at both scenarios here. One of the things that I love to compare a migration project to is moving, and nobody enjoys moving. It's not fun. It's not, it's not what you want to do. But once you get there, there's a really an excitement level. But a lot of times you have to think about things like, where am I moving to? How big or small is my new house going to be compared to my old house? What type of security, what kind of neighborhood am I moving into? How long can I stay at one place versus moving into another? A lot of these are some of the exact same types of considerations you need to think about when you're making that move to SharePoint. When you're looking at SharePoint, you're saying, okay, what version am I moving to? What features are available to me that I didn't have before? How granular can I get my security? What do I need to migrate? What do I need to kind of get from point A to point B? When you're moving, do you hire movers? Do you do it yourself? Do you kind of, share in that responsibility? Same sort of considerations when you're migrating, from a file share or a legacy intranet, extranet type of a system into SharePoint. There's a lot of different ways to move your content. We're going to talk about a lot of those things today. We're going to talk about just different options for you and how you move from point A to point B. One of the first things to consider is really having a vision around SharePoint. A lot of times, you see technology and you're saying, okay, I'm just going to move to this technology because it's the latest buzz or everybody says I should move here. You really want to think about what is the vision that you have. Why are you making that move to SharePoint? When you have that, your end users buy into it. When they say, hey, we're moving here to be more efficient. We're moving here so we can go pay for this. We're moving here so we can collaborate around documents. Then the end users move along with you as well. And that's key, is you want to make sure you get everyone involved within that process. With any migration project that I'm on, I always try to sort of educate the end users first, educate the client first into what's going on. A lot of times people would be like, okay, great, we're moving to SharePoint 2013. Fine, I don't know what it can do. Most people use SharePoint to just dump documents in there, and they say, well, what else can it do? And then you start talking about things like custom lists or image libraries or being able to store videos, and screencasts, and then being able to kind of create workflows and go paperless. Once you start to educate the users on the different options for what's available, you'll see a much greater buy-in. A lot of times it inspires people to say, well, that's fantastic. I want to be able to do this, this, and this within the process. I would love to be able to do this to refine the way I work. And so that's something that we like to make sure that people do, understanding what SharePoint can do for them. As you're looking through the process, you have to figure out what has changed since you've been using your old system. What are the things that you want to do before that you couldn't do back then? Mobile and tablets play a huge role now in everyday work. And so how are you going to work with that to make sure people can use the tools they bring to work every day to do their job? You look at what are your business goals, making sure that you're not just using technology for technology's sake, really kind of having strong, clear objectives on how you're going to move forward with the tool. A lot of times, by having those clear objectives, people buy in, and people are excited about what's going on, but you have to have that information detailed. One of the trickiest things, when I made the move coming from Chicago to San Francisco, I was in a place for 5 years, and I didn't realize, A, how much space I had in Chicago compared to what I was going to get in San Francisco, but just how much stuff I had to bring over. I had a garage. I had 4 or 5 different closets. I was there for 5 years. And what I didn't realize is just how much stuff I had. And I think consistently people underestimate when they're making a migration or a move just how much stuff you have. One of the first key steps in any migration is understanding what needs to get moved. Understanding what needs to get moved today, understanding what can stay where it is temporarily until you can make that move, understanding what you don't even need. So as you go through there and you're looking at things like file shares, sometimes clients come to us and say, we want to move our entire file shares onto SharePoint. A lot of times I'll just say, no. You don't want to make that big a leap right away. You want to try to take small bites and move them in as you can. Can you phase that approach in? When you're moving off of a legacy SharePoint, understanding the content that's there, a lot of times people get excited about SharePoint, in 2007, and you see all these little sites and information popping up all over the place. What you want to do is say, okay, hey, what do we need to move? What should we move? What can we move as we're going through there? How relevant is the content that we have around the environment that we need to move over? And as you're working with different users and security, you have different functionality that you didn't have before. Can you take the security and the rights that you're building, and can you apply them here as you're kind of working through there? What about other locations? Are there people's personal drives that they have information on? A lot of people now are storing information in OneDrive or Google Drive, and so you need to make sure you understand where all that content lives. And then are there any other locations to think about? A little extra credit too for anybody who knows where that picture came from, just kind of a favorite movie of mine. What you're looking at is a lot of times we'll use tools to help grab that inventory. One of the partners we enjoy working with a lot is Metalogic. They have some really strong tools to help us in inventorying some of this content and helping us to do planning around some of that content as well. We'll talk a little bit about options, for for making that happen, for tracking that inventory. Now be careful too, because it's not just going to be straight content inventory. If you're coming off of a legacy version of SharePoint, you want to make sure that you understand all the different customizations, all the different sites, profiles, and things that you've done in your old system as you're moving it into your new system. So make sure you look at not only your content, but your platform, and then within SharePoint, just thinking about a checklist that you're going to go through just to make sure to say, hey, did we do anything custom around some of these different pieces? How are we going to migrate that custom content over, or are we going to rethink it? You know, a lot of times what we'll talk about is rethinking your strategy around how you're going to take that and make that migration from point A to point B as you're moving forward. You know, understanding the limitations as you're moving into the new versions as well. All those things play a huge, huge role as you're working through each of the different pieces. One of the things that we talk about a lot is we try to get people to leverage new functionality within SharePoint. So many of our clients, so many of you on the phone, I'm sure you manage processes through Excel. And you're saying, hey, we'll just put that in Excel, we'll manage our task list, we'll manage our project as we kind of walk through there. And what I say is, look at something like a custom list. You know, look at something like an image library to store some of your documents. Are you doing things around business intelligence? Are you building custom applications? You know, as you look through those, making sure that you're working within the environment of SharePoint 2013 or SharePoint 2016. You know, as we go to the Ignite conference in May, I'm sure Microsoft's going to tell us sort of, hey, here's the new things that are coming out. Understanding what those limitations are, understanding kind of how you can work within there plays a huge role. I've used this slide a couple times in the past, and it's already outdated, right? So this is the SharePoint 2013 slide. It's already outdated. SkyDrive Pro has been renamed OneDrive for Business. You know, a lot of our clients, we're working with a client right now who's making a migration. Their personal drives are all getting migrated to OneDrive for Business. You know, so there's different options that you have that weren't out there before. If you're making that move to Office 365, the link that you want to live on is roadmap.office.com. Microsoft has been very transparent in how quickly they're putting some changes to the Office 365 environment to making sure that you can see sort of what is going on with there. I highly recommend kind of spending some time on that site and saying, okay, hey, understanding what some of the functionality coming down the pipe is, can you use that? How do you want to work with it? Another big piece in SharePoint 2013 is the social component. Microsoft is investing a lot of their time and effort into Yammer as a social tool for collaboration, as a social tool for working with projects and people. And so is that something that fits for your environment? Is that something that you need today? Is that something that you can work with and use a little bit later, kind of coming down the pipe? So, you know, understanding the full spectrum of what's going on here is really important. And like I said, a lot of times what we do is we'll go into a client and we'll just do a high-level 1-2 hour presentation on a lot of these pieces. You know, we'll talk with the client beforehand and say, which of these pieces matter to you, which are relevant, and then we'll kind of deep dive on the ones that do make sense for you as you're kind of making that move, because you have that SharePoint vision. You come in and say, here's what we want SharePoint to do, here's how we want to map that vision. Understanding some of that functionality around there is key as you're working through that. Another big piece, and this is not necessarily new functionality, but as SharePoint 2007 and 2010 and 2013 have evolved, what you've seen is the ability to have a really well-defined information architecture or taxonomy. And a lot of times we'll walk into a client and we'll start throwing terms around like metadata and tagging, and you know, we'll lose people very quickly. So a lot of times what we'll do is sort of show you with search how you can get search to work and do a lot of things around faceted search, around being able to come in and really get people excited about tagging their content. Now this is always an educational process. This is always kind of showing people, here's how, you know, for us, understanding how you want to classify that content, but then talking with the client and saying, okay, hey, how can we help to create simple navigation? How can we help you to simplify search so it works? One of the #1 complaints we hear about SharePoint is, hey, our search doesn't work. You know, we dump all this content in and our search doesn't work the way we want it to. So really coming in here and developing a strong information architecture and taxonomy is very, very important. I mean, I could literally spend hours just on this alone. So this is a really key piece that you want to look at as you are making that move. What is your taxonomy? How are you classifying content? And a lot of times you see that in folders that you have today, but what we want to do is take it out of folders, to get it out of the folders content, get people tagging their content as they're moving forward. The other important piece is really understanding all the different migration options that you have. And going back to that analogy of moving, it's the same thing. You know, when I moved from Chicago to San Francisco, I had to find movers. I decided I was going to drive my own car across the country as I came through there. I sort of had a combination of a lot of different tools to help me get to where I needed to be. With any SharePoint migration, it is the exact same. It is the exact same thing that you need to be thinking about. You know, a lot of people will say, "Hey, can we just do it out of the box?" Well, there's a lot of challenges in migrating from SharePoint out of the box and just using that. There's some great third-party tools that you can use to get yourself from point A to point B, particularly if you're going from SharePoint 2007 to 2010 or 2013, and then sort of using consultants or getting help. You know, how can you have people come in and help you with where you have weaknesses kind of within that process? When Microsoft looks at how they're doing the migration, you know, you look at sort of an in-place upgrade sort of a capability, or do you make that full-term sort of migration into that new environment? Doing an in-place upgrade is very simple. Sometimes if you're asked to move, you have in 2-3 days to move, you don't have time to go through your garage and figure out what you're going to keep and what you're going to toss. So a lot of times maybe you have to go straight to something like a database attach upgrade, where you're taking your old content from your old farm, you migrate those databases to the new farm. What happens is if you're moving, you know, from a 2010, they can stay in 2010 mode temporarily until you're ready to migrate them to 2013. Understanding these options are important as you're sort of making that leap. Now, this is not what we generally recommend for end users, but sometimes you just don't have the time. Sometimes you have too much quantity that you have to go through that you're just not going to have the time. This is sort of a nice intermediate approach to get you into that new environment, but you're not all the way into 2013. There's a lot of things that you need to be concerned about as you're making those upgrades, as you're kind of going through here. I'm not going to have time to kind of go through all of these slides, but I do want to just show you some of the things to think about as you're making that out-of-the-box migration, and just where are the issues, what can go wrong, and just kind of taking a look at there. And this slide deck will be available too, by the way. So I want to make sure that you don't have to worry about copying all this down right away. We'll make sure that the recording and the slides are available to you. You see as well, we have these database issues that we're working with, you know, and then you need to be working with SQL management and performance issues as well. And so there's a lot of things to think about as you're going through each of these different steps within the out-of-the-box migration. And like I said, if you don't have time, out-of-the-box is a very valuable tool, but I don't recommend it. I really say if you have the time to kind of, you know, figure out what do you want to move from your old home to your new home, how do you want to sort of classify that information, how do you want to work with that information, that goes a long way. One of the key choices that you need to make is which third-party tools would work for you. Do you need them? How can they help you to sort of get you to that next spot? There are a lot of different companies that can help you get from point A to point B. You know, we use the Logix Content Matrix tool. It works very well in sort of providing a structure to get people from different places. A tool like MetaLogix and some of the other ones will help you to skip right from 2007 to 2013. So one of the challenges that you have is you can't make that jump from 2007 to 2013 out of the box. You got to go 2007 to 2010, then to 2013. So you can, with some third-party tools, you can make that. One of the other things that we like to do a lot is we use the inventory that a tool like Content Matrix gives us to be able to say, okay, hey, let's give the end users spreadsheets of all their content. Let them tag and organize that content within the spreadsheet. The tool can then consume that spreadsheet to help us migrate from point A to point B. And we'll walk through that. We'll walk through just the steps in that real quickly before we get to the end. A lot of times when we think about using consultants for migration, I just think about it like movers. You know, I had movers help me for part of my move. I did as part of it myself that I thought would work well. You know, consultants like Protiviti and ourselves, we're excited to be able to help you with any sort of phase along that process. And sometimes what we'll do is we'll bring some of that expertise to bear to say, okay, hey, here are the things that you want to watch out for. When you are making that migration, here are the steps that you want to take, getting from point A to point B to point C as you walk through this. If you take one piece of knowledge out of this session, just one thing, make sure that you train and educate your end users on the new tool. The easiest way for a SharePoint migration to fail is to not educate those who will be using the tool. I can't tell you how many times we've seen the frustration where people are coming in and they're saying, hey, you know, that's great, we've got this fantastic new tool, but I have no idea how to use it. I have no idea how to tag my data. My job is twice as hard as it used to be. And the thing is that this is not just a one-time thing. You want to find this ability to do continuous education. And so you look at who are the champions within the environment. You know, can we train the trainers who can keep educating maybe our clients and our vendors, keep working through that? Can those champions and the people who are excited, give them lunch and learn. Say, hey, you know what, we'll bring you in for lunch. We'll show you this cool way to manage document libraries. Hey, we'll show you how to do some workflows and some form building. A lot of times we've been real successful with screencasts. We create 2 to 5 minute screencasts that we put right on the site, so if people have trouble, like, they click on it and they pop it and it's like run the video. We see that all the time now with the YouTube generation. People want to have that 2 to 5 minute video as they sort of work through some of these things. And then there's all types of certifications that you can get through and help those who are really excited about sort of what's going on. One of the things I want to do for you in closing here is kind of walk you through a sample migration plan that we're working through with one of our clients, and then, you know, kind of close and get some questions in as well. So one of the things that you see is, you know, a simple migration blueprint is to kind of go in, show your end users the benefits of the new functionality. A lot of times what we've seen just in a couple of clients that we're working with today, they're like, Malcolm, why are we doing this? I don't understand what the benefits are of going through this whole little process. So right away, I kind of show them the pie after it's been cooked and say, hey, here's what we're going to get to. So you show them really strong examples, and like, oh, then there's an excitement level that goes straight up. We talked about taking inventory, getting a sense for everything that's out there. Assigning owners, who owns what data? You know, you have to figure out, and then if somebody doesn't claim data, say, okay, this is the data that's not claimed. It's getting archived as we're going through there. Once those owners are assigned, have them figure out which data is redundant, which data is out of date, what's trivial that we have out there. We want to get rid of that data. Do we want to archive that data? What's the action that we want to do? So you give them a spreadsheet, has all their content in it as owners, figure out what action they want. Once they figure out those actions, then we get back together with them and we say, okay, hey, here's the data you identified that you want to move. Let's work with how you're going to map that data, classify that data, and migrate it to a new site. And so getting them an understanding of that, but then they have to take ownership of that. And that's the tough part, is you're saying, okay, hey, you have all this content you want to move. I need you to take that ownership, assign it, document it, tag it. We'll take it, and then when we're ready to move, we'll move it over. Provide that cross-functional training as you're going through there. And then when you're ready to launch, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll archive that old site. We'll make that old site read-only. We don't want to take it away from them. We don't want to delete it. We don't want people to get scared, but we do want to have that sort of transition period as we put all that information in there. And so archiving is a good way to sort of go about and do that. In closing, really use migration as a process to kind of reassess where you're at. You know, we talk about spring cleaning. We talk about, okay, you know, I got rid of over half of my stuff moving here because I just really didn't need it. I wasn't really using it. So think about using that as an opportunity to spring clean. Really think about your end users. Think about how they're going to use the system. Think about what problems are you solving for them in making that move to SharePoint. When you think about your end users, you provide them an experience that is mobile, tablet friendly, easy to use, that resonates with what they're doing. They will be excited to use the tool as you move forward. Empower those end users. Empower those champions with the tools and the things that they need to sort of make that migration successful, make SharePoint successful as they're kind of walking through it. So I went pretty fast today, tried to cover a lot. You know, a lot of times when we get into some of these presentations, I'll drop into more detail around sort of how those spreadsheets work, how the different tools work, some of the different inventories that we've taken, and kind of working through some of those issues. But what I want to do is turn it back over to Julia, see if we have any questions that I can answer as we wrap up.
Okay, great. We do have a couple of questions. If you guys have any questions, just insert them in the question window and we'll get to them now. Are there any special considerations to think of if I'm moving to Office 365?
Well, with Office 365, there's a couple of key things that you always want to think about. Is that Office 365 changes really fast. And so one of the things that Microsoft does is that you have basically a 7 to a 21-day window before you have to accept those changes. And so when we have that roadmap, it's important to pay attention to that roadmap. And then as you're developing apps within there, developing apps is going to be a little bit more complicated than in an on-premise scenario. So make sure any custom application development that you need to do, consider using maybe a hybrid scenario, consider different options depending upon how complex that is. Same with integrating with line of business systems that are going to be local. It's possible, it's doable, but it's just going to take a different level of effort to get to some of those things. And so really it's about the more high-level customizations you're doing, the more you want to think about sort of the limitations and the constraints that you're going to face with Office 365.
Okay, great. What are the biggest issues your team has run into in performing these types of migrations?
What's interesting, I like that one. What's interesting is that it's really sort of the amount of time that is needed on the end user side. People are busy. People are busy doing their jobs every day, and so when you tell them, hey, I need you to go in and tag 1,000 rows in this Excel spreadsheet about your content, it can be tough for end users. It's one of those things where you're taking them out of what they're doing daily and saying, hey, I need you to invest this time to get your content moved over. And that goes back to really showing them the benefits of why they're making that move, giving them the tools to say, hey, if you do this, we're going to give you all these other things to help you get to that next level as you make that move forward. But it's hard to get everybody involved and then everybody to do their task on time and kind of getting through so the migration works together. But a lot of times we have top-level support that says, okay, hey, they'll push a little harder on those people if we're not getting the information that we need.
Okay, great. So we are right at the top of the hour. Thank you, Malcolm, for presenting today, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. We will be back in 2 weeks where we will be talking about security and governance in Yammer. So make sure to join us then. Everyone, have a great day, and thank you again, Malcolm.
Thank you. Have a great everybody. Bye-bye.